I met this man, and he was very charming and handsome and very intelligent, and we continued to see each other, and we got married. And on our honeymoon, we were driving in Maine, and we were lost, or we were like trying to find where we were going. And I was reading the map, and I said something like, questioning him in some way, and he backfisted me, like an incredible backfist to my head. And that was the first experience with him physically touching me, hurting me.
I was about all 4.5 weeks pregnant. It was a week before Christmas, December 18th. We got married. I wore red, he wore green. And it was Super Bowl Sunday. On the day of our wedding, I got really upset because all the guys were watching the football game, all the girls were in the run room. This is my wedding day. What kind of celebration is this? He pulled me out in the back hallway, slapped me around. I was right by the stairs. I don't know whether he did push me or not, to be quite honest, but I did fall down the flight of stairs. And that was my wedding day.
He then took his fist and he punched me a couple of times, and I was dazed and I fell down, and then he went over to the table and he took a wine bottle and he threw it through the picture window, and then he ripped out the phone so I couldn't call anyone, and went upstairs and took 2 or 3 outfits from my closet and went out in the yard and burned them. And the next morning he went to the hospital because he'd broken his hand, and he came home and told me he'd been to the hospital, and he looked at me, and of course the whole side of my face was all black and blue. And he said, "Oh my," he said, "that's, what are you going to do to cover that up? We have to go to that party tonight."
I reached out, and I have this automatic grabbing sensation where if you're not doing things my way, I'm going to grab you and I'm going to make you do things my way. I'll raise my voice until you understand that it's going to be my way or it's going to be no way at all. And there's no way that anything will succeed if I choose for it not to, because things are going to happen the way that I determine that they're going to be.
I've been kicked, punched, slapped, and terrorized in an automobile. Once, while I was working in the district attorney's office, he kicked me with such force that I had a black and blue mark from my wrist to my elbow. And I told people the truth, but it's amazing what you can say with a smile on your face and get away with it. I've been devastated by emotional neglect. I've been on my hands and knees, literally begging for a response to my needs.
If he's angry, he can just take everyone's dignity. He does that first and then continues on with whatever abuse will come after that. And he did that with the kids all the time, and I tried to put myself between the boys, put myself between them so that I would get it rather than the kids getting it. And I always asked him to stop doing that, always. I could see how harmful it was to them.
The traumas were fairly endless. I lost my teeth. I didn't actually lose them. They were knocked out. So this abuse was fairly ongoing. What I have said before in reflection is there were scars all over my body. I was beaten up and down the length of the driveway. I wouldn't just be beaten, I'd be beaten for long periods of time.
This last relationship that I was in, he was the worst. I had never had beatings like that before. I remember my life at that point, I was enmeshed. I was drowning in the drug life, and I was using at a rate that was just incredible even to me. And this person was an addict also, and he wanted me to go out and to prostitute myself to get the drugs. And this is the mentality of this person, and it just gives you an idea of how insane this person was and how this person just wanted an excuse to beat me or didn't need any excuse to beat me. I would be prostituting, I would get out of a Trick's car, and he would beat me for being in a car with someone after he had sent me out to get the money. And that's how it was. It didn't matter what was happening, he would beat me. After he would beat me, he would always rape me. I remember I had children by this time, and they would be screaming and crying, and I remember that I would shut the door so that they wouldn't see me getting these beatings.
Sherry had Cedric in her arm. He went in the kitchen, got 2 knives. I don't know why 2, but 2 knives. And with one knife, he sliced the baby's face, which was Sherry was holding a baby. So she panicked. So there's about 12 feet from the kitchen to the bedroom. Sherry ran to the bedroom to try to call 911. So she ran there, she was screaming, I'm sure, because baby was slashed and his face is cut up. So she went in the bedroom and tried to call. He ripped the phone off. He tied her up with the telephone cord, so she couldn't make a phone call. And then he stabbed her 53 times to Sherry and 13 times to baby. She fought all the way to the end. She did not let baby get out her arm. So they died in each other's arm.
And I finally left him to secure a divorce after we were married for 24 years. And I left my job. I went to another state. I hid. I told everyone not to let him know where I was because, of course, I really did in my heart feel that if he found me, he would kill me. So I went to the bank and took out half of that money and planned my escape. And it was kind of disjointed, but I found a friend in Maine, and she hid me. I left my job. I had bought a car in February. I left in May, and I had bought a car in February against his protests, but I did. I sold my piano and bought the car, and that got me out of there. And I hid and paid for the lawyer, and I did it quickly.
Probably the abuse might have continued. Up until that time, I had hidden inside whenever I was injured or bruised or disfigured. But this time, they took me to the hospital, and there was a photographer there from the state police, and they took pictures.
And I realized that once I got away from him, I had the strength to say, you know, I can't be murdered. There's no reason for me to be. This is way out of whack. All of a sudden, I just knew I couldn't go back. I just couldn't go back, and I couldn't walk through that door and have him there. And you know, just because I think I knew if I went back, it would be death or, you know, severe, lifelong injury to deal with. And you know, I'm a happy, you know, person, and I always, you know, I had fun, and all of a sudden I realized my life had turned to hell. So I guess I just realized this is not going to be what's going to happen. I mean, this isn't going to be my life.
I didn't know what to do. My last act was grabbing my wife around the throat for no apparent reason, and I can't even remember what that was about. And from that point, I realized that there was something that I had to do, that I couldn't keep on living like this, and I couldn't keep on having her live in fear of me and seeing the fear in her eyes. think made me realize that I'm in trouble. I need some help. And not only becoming sober isn't going to do it. That was only part of it. But I still had the rage in me.
She was about 6 months old, and he beat me up pretty bad in front of her. And I went to the hospital. I had a contusion on my kidney, so I was urinating frank blood. And I knew there was something wrong, and I was in a lot of pain. Went to the hospital, and there was a nurse there, and the nurse said, "You've been in here before." And she was right, because she was the nurse that was there when he broke my nose. And I made up a name that time. I used to make up names. One, because I didn't have insurance, and two, because I just didn't want anybody to confront me about what was going on. I didn't know if there was a law. I didn't know if he'd get arrested, so I'd lie. So she, after everyone left and I got admitted, she came up from the emergency room to visit me, and she had a card with her, Detective Ann Stewart. And she says, "I know someone's hitting you, and you're not ready to talk about it. I get that sense. But you need to think that someday he might hurt you so bad you won't be around to raise that baby of yours." And that just hit me like a lead balloon, I'll tell you. From the day I left that hospital, I planned for 3 months what I was going to do.
Actually, that particular incident was the first time we were separated. It wasn't the black eye thing. It was a different thing. He threw a knife at me. He threw a knife at me, and I felt it whoosh past my head and go into the wall. And I called a friend. I barricaded myself in the bedroom and called a friend who was a police officer, who came to the house and asked him to leave. And later that day, I went to the state police barracks, and I filled out the paperwork that I knew like the back of my hand, having done it in court 1,000 times for other women. And so we were separated at that point for 2 weeks, and I allowed him to come back on the condition that he enroll in the MOVE program. That was about 4 years ago.
My wife had been telling me over and over again that I needed help, that I was being abusive, and I had no idea that that was the case. It just seemed like life was going along normally to me, until I began to notice in my sons the same kind of actions that I had seen my father do with me. And at that point, it began to come clear to me that they had gotten this from me, and that the reason I needed to get help was to try to stop the cycle of violence between the generations. It just never dawned on me that this wasn't the way that things were with everybody. I thought that that was the way life was, and you got whacked around, and you whacked those smaller than you around, and now I'm beginning to see that that's not the way things really need to be.
I went to the library when my therapist told me that I was being abused, and I was furious with her for saying that. And I went directly to the library and got every book on battered women and every book on domestic violence, and sure enough, there I was.
We were at my sister's house, and I always knew when I was going to be beaten by him, because he always had this look on his face. And I think that most women, or most people that are in abusive relationships, know when the person's going to hurt them because they have this look. And for me, it was always this look of utter hatred, and I never could figure out why this person hated me so much, that I had done nothing to be hated that much. And we were at my sister's, and he wanted me to go in her kitchen and get him something to eat, and I had said, I can't do that. This isn't my house. And he had that look. And I knew when we got home that he was going to beat me. And so when he went into the bathroom to use the bathroom, I went out my sister's door very quietly, and I ran. And I didn't go back to my house. I just ran, and I kept running, and I realized I was on a street where I knew where somebody lived, and I went there. He didn't leave my house for a couple of months, but I didn't go back until he was gone from there. And I remember being so afraid. I stayed in these people's house for like 2 weeks without coming outside because I thought he'd be looking for me. And what happened was, the reason why he didn't look for me was because he had gotten somebody else. The violence and the addiction came to an abrupt end. I went to jail, and I actually had somebody go to bat for me, Sister Janetta, and I got out, and I went into treatment, and my life had changed after that. Being in jail, I made a promise to myself and to God that if I got out, I would try to help women so that they wouldn't have to go through what I went through and end up in the places that I ended up in, through the violence and the drugs and the prostitution and all of those different things, the rapes and all of those different things that I had to go through because I didn't have a clue, I didn't have any information, and I didn't feel like I had any power to stop these things from happening to me. Last year, I had the opportunity and the honor of being able to go to China to the Women's Conference and to meet women from all over the world that were doing exactly what I was doing, working towards change for women to help to stop the violence and the oppression of women in their own countries. And now I feel like a bigger part of a bigger thing today, and that has recharged me.
They asked to do a story on me. Well, it came out and it was phenomenal, but oh my gosh, it was so powerful just to see that, you know, she told me it was going to be on page 3. They decided they put it on page 1, and the newsletter came and they gave me a whole stack of them, and I came up to the front door of my house and there's my picture, and I was like, oh my God, there's my story, it's in writing. And I was really ambivalent about what I had done. I was like, oh God, why did I do this? You know, this was the wrong thing. People don't need to know this. Then the phone calls started coming from nurses, other nurses. And they just didn't stop. I stopped counting at about 31 phone calls. And I was like, my God. And I could just feel how I was able to maybe impact on them. And just, they were so thankful that I did. And I just saw such a therapeutic effect from it. It was like, okay, maybe this is the right thing to do, you know? Maybe there was a whole purpose in what happened to me. You know, I didn't plan it this way. It all kind of evolved. If anyone ever told me I'd be a leader in this area in nursing and that I would have published on the topic and done research on it, I would have told you were crazy.
I kind of regret that I took as long as I did to straighten out, and I'm hoping I'm not unleashing another whole generation of violent men on the world. But I take reassurance in seeing that my youngest sons would rather hug me than punch my lights out.
I know, I have a sense of control, and I know that that's not my life anymore. That was my life, and this is my life, and I know the difference, and there is no connection other than in my memory. You know, I have to say that the relationship that I ended up in was such a strong, healthy one that, you know, together, well, it's been my work, but through that, I can look back on myself and realize that, I'm not a devil, and you know, my children are good people, and so I'm not the devil. You know, I'm not.
I can still feel that terror, staying up all night, wondering what he was going to do. So I know how to handle that now and how to be peaceful. But you never get away from it, really. So anyway, you can go on and you can have a different life. It took me a long time to leave there, but it's been 11 years now. And I have succeeded. I think there was still a lot of self-confidence in me that I said, I will grow and I will be able to survive. He will always have to stay in that mean, miserable body, but I can grow and be something more.
I've got 2 daughters now, 2 young daughters, and I want to be a good role model for them, and I want them to know that relationships are loving and not physically or mentally violent. And I don't want them growing up in a household like I grew up in. That's been my biggest fear. I want them growing up knowing that that behavior isn't okay and it isn't the norm. And if it's a lifelong struggle for me, I'm going to be there. Because like I said before, I want my children to have a normal life, free of violence and free of manipulation and free of being afraid.